Hey everybody, thanks for joining us today. I'm here with Pastor Chad, lead pastor of Freedom Life Church, and we were talking about this last week's sermon, and we are in part 16 of Exodus, and I didn't actually notice that until I looked at the screen whenever you were going up, and it was like part 16, and I realized like, oh, part 16, we're on chapter 14. I feel like we're actually doing pretty good.
Yeah.
You hesitated way too long.
No, I think, we're close at this point to being a week per chapter. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, it's worked itself out differently than that. You know, we've spent time in one chapter for multiple weeks, but we're really close to averaging about a chapter a week, which is good news.
Yeah.
That means we're going to come in under a year.
We moved through those plagues.
Yes, we did. We rolled through the plagues. We even covered 3 weeks worth of it, but it was like 5-6 chapters long. So I mean, you know, we really caught ourselves up. And there'll be other sections like that. There's going to be other sections like that where it'll be like this massive section of text that we will just maybe spend a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, but it will be like a massive section of text that will kind of break down like that. So,
well, I feel like we've been having a good time. I feel like the church has really appreciated, you know, kind of walking through Exodus, probably like, you know, they've never done before. And so I'm very excited to where we're going. We are only in part 16. And so there's going to be many parts to this.
That was nice. That was a nice change. We're only in part 16.
Exactly. You know, so we got more to go. This last week you were talking about the Israelites passing through the Red Sea and how God made a way out for them. Yes. And it was very interesting. I don't think I ever really captured the verses 1 through 4 where God kind of told them just to like, hey, chill out for a second, you know, let Pharaoh kind of, you know, let me harden his heart a little bit, and he's going to come after you guys. And I don't think I ever caught that part of it before until you said it specifically and you actually made a thing about it. Yeah. And so I really appreciated that part personally. But anything else that you were kind of maybe leaving out from this last Sunday?
Well, I would say in the whole series, if I could say, I left out a whole sermon. There was a sermon that was going to be built out for that moment. Mm-hmm. The idea that God will lead you in ways that sometimes don't make sense. Something to that effect. I mean, as far as, I don't know what the title would have been because I ended up cutting it all together. Like, I don't know. I mean, if there's like some type A out there that's really tracking every second, we really didn't cover chapter 13 specifically in a sermon.
Right.
I mean, you actually leaned over to me right before I went up there and said, hey, are you covering 13 at all? You know, because you're that way, right? Yeah. You know, so, and really we just talked about what happened in 13. Yeah. But we didn't actually build a whole sermon around it. But there was originally when I was looking at the series and going, I kind of want to do something. There was one part in there where I don't know if you remember that conversation or not, but it was like months and months and months ago. There was a sermon that was meant to be there, or I should say that I was thinking about being there, and then ended up going, no, I wanted the Passover moment and the Red Sea moment to roll together. Does that make sense? And that's what eventually I really felt like we can just talk about what happened there. But there was a sermon originally that was going to kind of be like, hey, you know, they're meant to go north. That would be quicker. Yeah. But if you look on a map, they go south, and God takes them out there. And in chapter 13 and chapter 14, he tells them, wander around. And he tells them why. Like, I want the Egyptians to look at you and go, they don't have any clue what they're doing, you know? And I felt like that maybe that would have an element of, you know, sometimes we look foolish to the world. The Christian, the person that is spiritual understands the things that are spiritual and understand what's happening, where the world can look at what we're doing and it looks foolish, it looks strange. And so God does that, you know. So so that's cool. Obviously, I think that's really great. The one thing that I didn't say in the sermon, we talked about the concept, but I actually had somebody come to me afterwards, and I kind of talked for a second about it outside the church actually. They just kind of mentioned, talk to me a little bit more about because I mentioned the James text at the end. We read the James text where it's, if you're tempted, don't blame God. God tempts no one.
Right.
And they kind of wanted clarification because I talked about that. Like, God doesn't tempt anybody.
Yeah, you briefly touched on that.
I touched on that kind of at the end. I almost left the James text out completely. Actually, in the middle of the sermon, I almost just stopped and left it out. And then I thought, no, I think there's probably some people in the room going, why is God tempting us? Why is God, putting us... And the word that I did not use that I wished I would have, that I'll use here, is it's the difference between testing and tempting. That God will test us, and the Bible's clear about that. He'll test our faith. He'll test who we are, and we're going to see that. God actually says that later on in the book of even Exodus. He'll go, I'm doing this to test them, to test the people.
Right.
And so he'll test, but he won't tempt. And I didn't say those two terms. I just said tempt, and then tried to explain it through like the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He'll put it right in your front yard. He will test you. But what he won't do is tempt you to do it.
Right.
And that's two different things. He will orchestrate moments that will test where you're at, that are there to reveal in us what's going on in our heart, which it does for the Israelites in this moment.
Right.
To land at the Red Sea, no way around, no way over, no way through, and there's no way back, because here comes the Egyptians. I mean, he sent the Egyptians after them for this purpose, to make it go. There's no way to do this. And in that temptation, it reveals something in them. It reveals their desires, to return. It reveals their distrust of the Lord, their lack of faith in what God's doing, and even his messenger Moses that's leading them. It reveals a lot of things in them. So God will test you. He'll put you in moments to test you. He definitely will. But what he won't do is tempt. He won't go, oh, you should.
Yeah.
And try to coax you to do it. He won't do that. And that's the two different things. And I didn't necessarily explain it directly that way until I was, standing later on, and I said that to that individual, and I went, oh, that might be a good thing to say here. To go, that's really what we were talking about, is that there's a difference between the testing of the Lord, because he will do that. But tempting is different. You see the devil tempt in the garden. But you see God test in the garden. So God tests them by putting the tree of the, you can eat everything else, just not that. Just don't touch this one. And there's a testing. He orchestrates a moment to go, because he tells them, don't touch it. He doesn't go, hey, don't touch it. Oh, unless if the fruit looks good, He doesn't do that. He doesn't tempt. The devil comes to tempt. God is there to test and to reveal in you what's broken, And so, anyway.
Well, kind of same context, because the verses that you're talking about, whenever they kind of go back, is verses 10 through 12 and of chapter 14. And they kind of have this kind of dialogue and kind of this complaint against Moses and God, saying, why did you bring us out here? Did Egypt not have enough graves, and so you brought us out here to die?
That's a great line, too.
Like what's happening here? And so the Egyptians, or the Israelites, were really confused on what's happening. And so they were questioning Moses, they were questioning God, they're questioning themselves. Why did we listen to you? And it was just like they were so confused. They didn't know what was happening at the moment, and so the only thing that they could do was start blaming others on the decision that's being made, but then also just not what you're talking about, trusting God. And I think many times that can be us. Could you kind of talk a little bit on how that kind of parallels to us today, and how we just kind of falter back into that mode?
I think that's a great question. I think it tends to be that we are. Well, we use the cliche all the time that we're creatures of habit. And I think that's seen in our struggle with our sin nature, with our flesh, and kind of where God in Christ draws us out of our sin, out of the domination of our flesh and sin nature. But I think that we are creatures of habit. We tend to gravitate towards what we know and what we understand. And sometimes it's hard for us to say, well, I'll use C.S. Lewis, he's got a great example of, it's like trying to take a kid to a vacation on the sea, but all he's ever known is the slums. Mm-hmm. And he's satisfied, basically is what he said. He's satisfied with making mud pies in the slums because he can't grasp a vacation at the sea. He can't do that. And I love that picture that Lewis uses, it's just, sometimes we're just so comfortable with where we are. I think I made the statement in the sermon, it's just easier to sin. Mm-hmm. It's just easier to just not care, to have no conviction in our hearts. Because see, conviction isn't fun, and I think that might be where we struggle the most, is that when we get out there in freedom, and then God begins to go, let me show you something. Mm-hmm. Let me reveal something in you, kind of like what we're talking about. Let me reveal something. Let me show you where your heart is. And he begins to show. He begins to kind of test. Yeah. Like the refiner's fire, Malachi, right? Mm-hmm. This refiner's fire, and then he begins to bring that to refine you and to make you more pure and to make you like him. That gets uncomfortable, and we don't like that, and we don't like that pressing and that pressure that comes and that conviction that comes. And I think we tend to, in our selfishness, our self-focusedness, want to kind of return to what was comfortable, because it was way more comfortable to not be convicted about our activities at all.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But then Christ comes, shines light into our hearts, draws us in by the beauty of the gospel, and we go, yes, finally I'm free from all this darkness that I didn't even realize I was walking in. Yeah. And then once we get out there, mm-hmm. Oh boy, and that tends to be the drawback to that, this drawback to, let's go back to where it was comfortable. This is hard out here. And I think that's interesting, and that's one thing we didn't necessarily talk about. Why the wilderness? Mm-hmm. Why does he draw people out to the wilderness? God consistently does this. Yeah. If you look throughout your Bible, God consistently does this. He draws people out into the wilderness. Yeah. Even by the time we get to John the Baptist in the beginning of the New Testament, where is he? Yeah. He's in the wilderness, and he's calling people out to the wilderness. Yeah. And where does Jesus go? Yeah. Right before he begins his ministry, he's drawn out by the Spirit out into the wilderness. God has a habit of drawing people out in the wilderness. Why? Well, it's because it's a great picture of, because he's going to be your only hope. You're going to have to figure out how to trust him. Right. You're going to have to figure out that he's faithful, like the text we read in 1 Corinthians 10. God is faithful, and he's going to take care of you. Yeah. He's going to provide a way of escape, so don't bail on him. Mm-hmm. But you're out there in the wilderness. There's nothing but him out there. Mm-hmm. And that's really clear. Where there was some provisions in Egypt, mm-hmm. I mean, they had houses and food and whatnot. Yeah. They had to work hard. But in comparison to the wilderness, to their natural minds, it was, this is a lot harder than we want it to be. And I think that's a good view of the Christian life, and I think that's sometimes the temptation to pull us back that way, because we're such creatures of habit. We get so comfortable with where things were, and we tend to want to go the easier way. Mm-hmm. Even though the more spectacular way is walking through the dry ground of the sea with the walls of water on both sides, and we miss that moment so often because we tend to be drawn back. I'll just say this and then I'll stop belaboring the point. But I like this just came to my mind. I like the text in, I think it's Hebrews 12. Early on in the chapter, where he just got done saying, focus on Christ, the author and perfecter of your faith. He mm-hmm. he begins it and he perfects it. But then he goes into, and so now consider him who has dealt with such hostility from sinners, and in your struggle with sin, that you have not yet, gotten to the point of shedding blood, right? Right. And then he makes a little statement in there. It's brief, but he makes a statement in there. I think it's like verse 5 or 6. He makes a brief statement. And have you forgotten this exhortation that addresses you as sons? Have you forgotten this? Mm-hmm. Don't forget this. Yeah. And I think that maybe captures a lot of maybe the heart deep issue. Yeah. We're comfortable, yes. And we tend to draw back. We're creatures of habit, yes, but that tends to be the surface issue. I think the deeper issue is we forget what he's doing.
Yeah.
And that what he's doing is he's making us family. What he's doing is he's making us sons and daughters.
Yeah.
And he's doing the hard work necessary to give us the spirit within us that cries, Abba, Father. You know, it's putting us in that position to begin to relate to him in that way. And I think the writer of Hebrews captures it well. Like, look, you're struggling with sin, but don't forget you're a son.
Yeah.
Don't forget that.
Right.
That you're not, so now you get to struggle with sin as a son. Mm-hmm. That's totally different. So you're now a son, a daughter. Like you belong to him. So now in your struggle with sin, you get to struggle from that perspective, that I'm his.
Right.
I'm no longer dominated out here. But then also you struggle because you're a son.
Yeah.
Right? Because he keeps going and says, look, you know, you're going to struggle so that God can discipline you. And what's the discipline for? To show you that you're not illegitimate.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think the deeper issue in us, the reason why we want to go back, is that we don't understand and we forget. Our hearts forget what he's trying to do in us, that he's trying to make us family. He's trying to make us sons and daughters.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's hard for our little minds to wrap themselves
Well,
around.
I think it's quite a mercy. The Lord continues to show us who he is, because, you know, it's always that joke. I don't even remember what I ate for breakfast this morning.
Yeah.
You know, it's always that.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the Lord's constantly reminding us, you know, I didn't forget my promises that I made with, you know, with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I didn't forget those promises, you know, as if, you know, he's a person who forgets like us.
Yeah.
You know, we forget everything, you know, because we're human and we forget everything. Ask my wife. Yeah. Forget everything, you know. And the Lord, I think, shows us a great mercy by continuing to show us, like in verse 4, it's saying, you know, this is for my glory.
Yes.
And to show everybody that I'm the Lord.
Yeah. And
he just, you know, and I mentioned this a while back in a sermon where it's like throughout the entire Bible, it's like showing he's the Lord. Yeah. I'm showing you that I'm the Lord. I'm the Lord, you know, good. And I feel like it's just a mercy, because knowing who we are as humans, we forget.
Well, and I like your usage of, you know, it's a real mercy, and you see that mercy come to fruition when God doesn't go, okay, well, yeah, you're going to die right here. Egyptians are going to come, or you're going to drown. Here we go. No, he parts the waters.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He parts the waters, man, and says, come on. I told you. And God is consistently faithful. Even when we're faithless, he remains faithful, and I love that about him. And in that moment, he goes, oh, okay, I'm going to show you anyways.
Yeah.
I know that you don't believe me. I know that you're completely bailing out on what I'm doing. And you don't see the freedom in this, and I get that. Well, but then he parts the waters.
Yeah, and if you look at it from I know that we pick on the Israelites a lot. You know, we're like, you're such dummies. Yeah. You know, but you know, hindsight's 20/20. But with them, I mean, they just dealt with like 400 years of slavery. Where who could they trust? They can't trust the king. They can't trust anybody. Yeah. And stuff, and
that's not us.
It's hard. Yeah. Right.
We haven't dealt with 400 years of that. That's not us.
Right.
And so we're living in a completely different time, and we laugh and even scoff at them, like you're saying. But the reality is that's all of us. We all get in those moments where it seems hopeless and it seems like I'm never going to get out of this, and God can't do anything about it.
Right.
Or God won't. Or we're just convinced God won't do anything about it. And that's just not true. Right. God is, if you belong to him, if you're his, he's there.
Yeah.
You know? And I would even say, even if you're not his, if you are honest and you look back in your life, you're going to see moments where God was actually moving in your life and wanting you to see him, you know, and I think God consistently does that. And so, you know, in the sermon this coming week, you know, we're going to see their rightful response to this moment, and I'm looking forward to that sermon. And then what's going to be funny is that we'll, you know, they they go off the rails again very, very quickly,
Right.
and we'll see that. And so it's us, and it's like what we've been saying for 16 weeks now in the book of Exodus. This is us. Make no mistake. We're going to see our lives in this moment where, we're going to kind of go on this roller coaster ride with the people of God as they're kind of figuring out life with Him, and it's kind of up and down.
Yeah.
Because they go from this one moment on this side of the Red Sea of, oh God, we're out here, you're out here to kill us, you just didn't want to have to bury us in Egypt, so we came out here just to die and get, probably picked clean by the wildlife, and so that's why we're out here to, oh my goodness, we're walking across dry land and there's water, and you killed all the Egyptians, and we freak out, in a rightful response to this moment,
Right.
But then it's just this back and forth, and it's God's patience is pretty clear. And so I love it,
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I enjoy talking about it, and I hope everyone's enjoying the sermons on Sunday mornings. If you missed it, make sure that you go to freedomlifechurch.net and check out all of our sermons. Maybe just get caught up. If you're new to Freedom Life Church, you can just go to our website and you can see all of our sermons there. Just get caught up and just pop in your headphones, and while you're working around the house or whatever you're doing, you can just get caught up all there. You can also do that with all of our follow-up videos. If you're like, hey, I really enjoyed this follow-up video, give us a like, share this video, and then go check out all of our other ones on our resource page. And so speaking of our resource page, we also have Bible studies, or our reading plans, I should say, so that you can follow along with where we're at in the sermons. We try to update that all the time. And so this coming Wednesday, we have life groups, so make sure that you're checking out a life group. We have 3 life groups available for you, and hopefully we'll be getting some more soon. If you have kids, you can drop them off here at the church. If you have teenagers, you can also drop them here at the church. We are having Freedom Kids going and the Well Student Ministries going. And so I really hope y'all are enjoying the sermon. Make sure you check out our life groups, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, guys.
See you.
Bye.